Welcome back to the Accountability Hour, the podcast where we tackle double standards, self-improvement, and the messy realities of relationships. This is Lynn Watchhorn. How do you get more intimacy in your relationship? And by intimacy, you know what I mean. I just don't know what words I can say. In our society, we are so focused on women's needs. It's all about women all the time. That often, men's needs are just completely ignored or invalidated in some way. And this is like the main thing I always see. A lot of people don't understand what intimacy actually means for men. And it's not always about going to the bedroom. It could be like emotional safety where he can be vulnerable without being mocked or dismissed or emasculated. And then, of course, the physical affection part. But it's not just that. It's the touch, the closeness, the hugs. I have met so many men who they want a hug or a quick back scratch. They're not asking for anything more than that per se. Of course, they would be happy with that too, but it's not all about that. And in general, being wanted and not just being tolerated or used as a wallet, men want to be chosen and desired. And it's so weird to me that so many women don't get this when they want the same thing. So why does this type of thing happen overall in relationships? I know a lot of men, in the beginning stages, everything's great, but then complacency sets in. And this is perfectly natural in relationships. You stop initiating physical touch. Maybe you're prioritizing the kids, work, or even social media over connecting with your partner. And unfortunately, as a man, your first thought might be to, just pretend you're fine because men are taught to be low maintenance, to not bring it up. And unfortunately, with a lot of relationships, the dynamics will start to shift the longer you guys are together. She may see you more as a provider than a partner. She may associate affection with obligation, which is kind of weird when she should be mutually wanting that. Or she might use physical intimacy as a reward for you, your birthday, or when you do something for her, which is not right either. And I know a lot of men who are dealing with this and they bring up the conversation. I always recommend, talking to your partner and avoiding misunderstandings. But in a lot of cases, these men are instantly invalidated. She might be like, oh, that's all you think about, or maybe even accuse you of being selfish or manipulative in a way when you're just asking for your needs to be met. Or she might even act like she might act like a victim just because you asked. And this just encourages you to withdraw long term and not bring it up ever again. And maybe even overthink it and think, oh, maybe I'm asking for too much, or I'm being unreasonable in the relationship, when the reality is you're not. Over time, you might have to deal with internalized shame. You ask yourself every day, why doesn't she want me? Does she not find me attractive anymore? And if you have to ask for it, maybe you feel like deep down you just don't deserve it. And unfortunately, this actually can cause you to have performance issues in the bedroom down the road when, you finally start getting that. Your self-esteem is lowered. Maybe you feel like your identity is missing. You might start feeling like you're unlovable. And it's really hard on men, and so many women just don't understand it. And you might get to the point where you stop trying and you're not trying to punish or trick her, but the rejection just hurts so much. So you become quiet and distant and checked out. And then, of course, this is one of those moments where the woman randomly brings up, you've changed. You're not who I met or started dating. And the problem with a lot of men dealing with this is they struggle long term, because you'll start to fantasize about, maybe a physical connection with somebody else because you can't get your needs met. And this is not, some women will jump to be like, oh, he's going to cheat on me. Not necessarily, but it can be hard to be in a relationship with your needs not being validated or met. And you might start to lose respect for her, which makes sense, or build contempt because she's not prioritizing you or your needs. And for a lot of men, this ends up being the before part, before they start cheating. But for a lot of men, they don't end up cheating. But it's still, the temptation might be there a little bit. And how could you blame a man in that situation? But I do understand where you're coming from on this. What should you do in this situation? Assuming you already discussed it with her and nothing's changed. Maybe she even invalidated you, or maybe she said she'd do better. She fixed the problem for 1 or 2 weeks, and then she went right back to how she was before. Ask yourself this: have you clearly communicated exactly what you need? And what are you asking for something reasonable? If you're asking to do that 10 times a day, I mean, let's be real here. Most people don't have the schedule where they can make that work. But if you're asking for it 2 or 3 times a week or once a week, that is perfectly reasonable. And are you doing what you can for yourself? You're not neglecting yourself. And if you did all these things and you're still being denied, you're not the problem. Next, stop trying to do everything for her and make her life easier. And this is not about you being manipulative in any way. This is about conserving your energy and taking care of yourself. Sometimes we try to earn affection through overworking, buying things, emotional labor. A lot of women will be like, oh, if you cleaned more, you would get that. And so you clean more. You're doing pretty much everything around the house. And she's still not interested in you in that. Doing more of what already isn't working isn't going to change her mind and make it start working. Not only that, if intimacy becomes a prize that you get for doing all this stuff for her, that creates a really imbalanced relationship. She has all the power, and deep down she probably knows it. This is where detachment can be helpful. Instead of putting all your energy into her, put it back into yourself, your goals, your friends, whatever it is. Start building yourself. Do your hobbies. And start rebuilding your confidence, because something like this can really just destroy you from the inside out. Maybe you used to go out with her 3 times a week. Drop it down to 2 or 1 times a week. Become a little bit more busy on your own stuff and your own life. And with psychology, this can also kind of build attraction, because you kind of want what you can't have. If you're busy, you're working extra hours, or you're doing this or that, you become less available, which might increase her attraction towards you, especially if beforehand you were kind of doing everything for her, you were in her space constantly. That's like a recipe for her taking you for granted. Unfortunately, in some situations though, this may be her excuse to then maybe even cheat on you or do more stuff on her own and then blame you for it, blame you for not being available. Usually this happens if she's really toxic and she just doesn't see what she's doing. Or maybe she just doesn't care. The thing is, you cannot force her to change no matter what you do. And if she's not also working on it, then there's only so much you can do. Now, it's one thing if maybe she has a medical issue. I mean, and you brought it up to her and you see her actively doing stuff to try to fix the problem. Maybe she's drinking more water, eating better, exercising. You see her scheduling doctor's appointments. She's taking action. And you know, in that situation, if the situation were reversed, that you would be doing the same thing she is. You know, she's actively trying. That's different. And I feel like in those situations, you should be understanding it's not going to happen overnight type of thing. But if she's taking absolutely no action and making no effort, that changes the dynamic completely. In some cases, you might have to be prepared to walk. And I know that's really difficult. Or if this is not a deal breaker for you, you can let it go and just try to exist happily in the relationship. But that would require you fully accepting that things are not going to change and you're going to be okay with that. Either decision is valid. It just depends on you and how much you actually need this. I know a lot of men, it's a non-negotiable. They have to have it. And that's completely reasonable and understandable. But for a lot of people, if they don't feel like there's consequences to their actions, they'll continue doing what they're doing indefinitely. Unfortunately, they will not have enough empathy for you to take action. It's just easier and more comfortable for them to continue down the path they currently are on. And heck, we're all like this with some things. Like if you think about it, you might be like that with some areas of your life, and it's reasonable with kind of. You just want to know that she does truly care about you. Maybe she does care about your other needs in the relationship and she's constantly thinking of you. And this may be one of those things she falls short. But again, that's up to you to decide if this is a deal breaker for you. What not to do in this situation? Don't cheat. I know that's easier said than done in these situations. But if you cheat on her, you just validate her not even taking action. Because when someone cheats, it's easy to assume that the other person was in the wrong about every single thing. And at that point, there's no self-reflection whatsoever on the other side of it. But to be fair, your relationship might be over in general. You're just better off breaking it off and moving on at that point. Also, it will delay your healing. Next, don't wait. Don't sit there and just hope that things will change and not take any action. You know, you've already brought it up. You've actively tried to do something and then she doesn't do it. So you just sort of give up and just continue your life, even though this is a deal breaker for you. This is how men waste decades of their life. I know it can be really hard to start over, but realistically, if things don't change, you know the relationship's going to end. It's going to end either way. It's better just to rip that Band-Aid off and get going. Start rebuilding your life again so you can eventually find someone that will take action on your needs. Next, do not blow up emotionally. I hate this so much because women are allowed to blow up emotionally, right? And if you invalidate them, they call you toxic. But again, it'll give her the excuse to say that you're the problem, even though you're just trying to get your needs met and maybe it's been weeks or months and it's torturing you on the inside. You want to try to stay composed the best that you absolutely can. Because unfortunately, we live in a world where the person that blows up emotionally, even if they're completely valid in doing so, is often considered the crazy or the unstable one, rather than someone who is just beyond their limits. Next, do not gaslight yourself into thinking that your needs are too much. They are not too much. What you're asking for is reasonable. And heck, I know the majority of men, you guys ask for so few things. You only ask for a handful or 2 handfuls of things that are perfectly reasonable that most women could meet the requirements if they tried. So don't try to convince yourself that your needs aren't worth meeting. They are. If you stay in the relationship and you don't do anything about it, you will lose yourself gradually over time. And you will regret the time that you lost. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who might benefit from it. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and let me know your thoughts.